Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about Pakistan's, of course, Pakistan has alerted the global community on what's happening across the border in India as far as the plight of minorities is concerned, the extremism there is concerned. We'll be talking about, of course, the attacks on Indian Muslims, also the overall inflammatory situation as it's seen to be brewing in India for a while now. And of course, Pakistan has asked the international community to take a stand for the plight of minorities in India. We were talking about what kind of headway, if any, we have been able to make with the international community on taking a stance on this, and why there is such a lack of response there. A little later on, we'll also be talking about, of course, the PTI has called for protests. A nationwide call for protest at 9 today, and what kind of a turnout can be expected, what this means also for overall the precarious economic situation in the country at this time, of course, and also the call by the Prime Minister earlier on for a charter of economy, which doesn't seem to be making any headway with particularly PTI. And what these kind of protests can mean for the already tumultuous economic situation in the country. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Javed Jatoon, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us Raja Kesar, who is a foreign affairs expert. Thank you for being with us. Javed sir, for a while we've been talking about what's happening across the border now. We've been talking about, the extremely inhumane treatment meted out to not only Muslims, but, we've seen what happened to Christians also. So it's across the board minorities. We've also warned the international community, particularly on Saturday, about the Hindu nationalist movement in India, all of that. But do you think it's going to make any headway? We will also again be talking about the clout, economic clout that India has in the world, the kind of diplomatic relationship they have all over, and that the world has allowed them to get away with a lot.
Thank you very much, MAHRUKH. I think that two very important factors which are playing an important role in what is happening inside India. As you pointed out, that it's not only Muslims. In fact, the entire diaspora of minorities in India is being targeted by Hindu nationalists.
Right.
MAHRUKH, basically the rise of Narendra Modi was on these particular slogans of Hindutva and persecution of Muslims, and they talked about the 800 years rule of Muslims in India and the way they depicted that particular era in front of the Indian young population and as victims, and they were the real indigenous people, and the Muslims were invaders, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, what has been done in India, no other leader in India has done that. They have literally galvanized the whole Hindutva crowd over there. A massive majority of young Indians, they have started believing what Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically propagates day in and day out, and that is India for Hindus and no space, no place for other minorities, including Muslims. But I think Muslims are being targeted in particularly because Muslims are the largest minority in India. More than 200 million Muslims live over there, but unfortunately they are not economically empowered. They do not occupy the important positions in the government. They don't occupy important positions in the businesses, and they don't occupy important positions in the bureaucracy as well. Only because the doors of education, the quality education in India, they have been closed and shut on Muslims. Employment opportunities are very few and far in between. So I think there's nobody. Congress has gone down the drain. Basically, Congress used to be a very formidable political force in India.
Let me come back to you. Raja Kesar, I hope you've been listening to what Javed sir was saying. But do you think it's going to make a difference at all? Because, of course, I mean, there are no two opinions on what's happening in India. But then there's also the fact that we're not seeing any kind of a tangible reaction come out, whether it's international community, United Nations. Do you think that's likely to change at all in the kind of scenario that we are in at present?
Unfortunately, thank you, Maruf. Unfortunately, we are coming across a very muted and dumb response from international community. Otherwise, the situation right now in India is very uncharacteristic, and it merits a very serious attention. And I believe that this is the very high time where India needs to be declared as a country of particular concern under IRFA, International Religious Freedom Act. So India needs to be declared as a country of particular concern for minorities, because what is happening in India right now, it is something really scaring, and it's really horrifying, because the minorities, they have been squeezed, and they have been stripped off from their legal constitutional rights. What is right now happening in India, I mean, this bulldozer justice, it is something which is unprecedented. India has emulated a model of Israel, and without any inquiry, without any conviction, you are imposing a collective punishment upon the largest minority, and just to silence them because they have protested against BJP's ferocious Hindutva. So this BJP's particularism, it is taking a new stride, and this is something which needs to be really taken care of right now. Otherwise, this Hindutva juggernaut, it is likely to engulf all the minorities, particularly Muslims in India.
Right, let me go to Javed Sahab. Javed Sahab, right. The statement that we put out, and I think I want to read that, is that even as victims of violence belong to diverse religious minorities across the world, there is a disproportionate growth in hate speech and stigmatization of Muslim communities and individuals, leading to acts of violence. I mean, this is very, very apt, because we are seeing this rise in violence. We're also seeing a no reaction from Modi-led India. But then again, this was an interesting point that somebody pointed out, that when we talk, there seems to be some sort of confusion as far as the BJP is concerned. Because on the one hand, of course, they've come on the banner of not extremism, but anti-Muslim rhetoric that the party has now stood for. And on the other hand is of course Modi looking at the way things are faring, and things are getting inflammatory within India. So they really are, I mean, in a precarious situation. How do you think that's going to lead? What do you think that's going to lead to?
As you pointed out in your own intro, that global community looks the other way when Muslims in particular and minorities in general are persecuted in India. I would like to quote the statement of State Department spokesman Ned Price. He said that he condemned the derogatory remarks made by BJP leaders against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. And in the same statement, he said that we continue to take up the issue of human rights in India with the Indian government. But I believe they haven't taken that particular issue strongly enough to be a deterrence as far as Modi government's policies are concerned.
Because of the economy?
Of course, MAHRUKH, they have got the second largest population in the world, and the biggest market for every European and the North American countries. And that is the very reason that despite the fact they know that the policies being pursued by Prime Minister Narendra Modi are against human rights, persecution of minorities and Muslims, and we have seen in the recent past that Muslims were targeted particularly, and the way they were targeted, it reminded the kind of Nazi persecution of Jews in Germany before the Second World War. So I think same kind of a persecution is taking place in India, but not the kind of.
It's very dangerous to ignore it, because obviously, if the world hasn't learnt a lesson from what happened in Germany, and India is a huge piece of land, and for this kind of situation to develop there, it's not that it's not going to have a spillover effect.
It is going to have a spillover effect. MAHRUKH, reason is that if you allow one government, one totalitarian government to do what they are doing in India, you encourage other dictators and other authoritarian regimes in the world. They start taking it for granted that if you have some kind of a clout vis-a-vis the USA and the European Union, they can get away with everything they do as far as their policies are concerned. So I think Hindutva is basically a replica of Nazism, and this is being allowed, and that's terrible.
Rajasab, do you think that it's going to change at all? Because of course the spillover effect is one of those things that should concern the world if it's not particularly concerning them at this time. And for the world to ignore it and proceed and look at the advantages that India may offer, what can this mean? And also particularly for this kind of rhetoric to resonate with the majority in India, that's also concerning, isn't it?
Indeed, MAHRUKH, it's a very particular question, and it's a very pertinent question, in fact. You see, what we have seen over the years, that Indians, they have always been able, or they managed to get away with the fallout of some very heinous and very uncharacteristic developments. For instance, revocation of the Article 370, then the amendment in the Citizenship Amendment Act, and then very recently the way they have mainstreamed the HAMEED, and and then a kind of reincarnation of the history by banking on the straw man fallacies. It is taking BJP's Hindutva to a next level. And we see that minorities, and particularly Indian Muslims, they are at the receiving end. And this proto-fascism, it is ending in no near sight. Because India, it attracts the rest of the world with its consumerist attraction, and at the same time, the world has its geostrategic interests intertwined with India. So that is why international community is not coming up with a categorical rebuttal of what is happening right now in India. And it's very concerning and it's very alarming at the similar time. Because as Jadoon Saab was pointing out, if it continues unabated, so you are encouraging the authoritarian regimes across the globe to actually unleash egregious persecutions and human rights violations against their own minorities. We are seeing that this international liberal values, they are on a down slump, they are backsliding, but they must not backslide to this extent that the international community, it loses its faith in humanity. Because what is right now happening in India, it's not only anti-human, but it is something where a minority is basically stripped off from its right to live with dignity. So you cannot have the two kind of treatments, or you cannot have the duality in the applicability of the law. For the rest of the world, or for the rest of the Indians, if they protest, the rule is different. But if Indian Muslims, they will protest, their houses, they will be bulldozed, and they will be left with rubble. That's something insane. So this insanity and this RSS mindset and this incendiary rhetoric which BJP has fed in the past 8 years, it has led India to a myopic, parochial society. It is leading India's evolution to a retrogressive society. And what is more unfortunate, that this is becoming a palpable and at the same time acceptable and plausible norm in India. So, to my
Javed Saab, of course, you know what Raja Saab is saying is true. But again, isn't it concerning that BJP is getting the kind of support from its own people 8 years now, and you know they're banking on this? It's again going to, it doesn't seem to be losing their support. In fact, it banks on this kind of rhetoric to get votes. How do you think, I mean, that is going to translate? That's particularly concerning because it can potentially lead to India's breaking, within itself, because we saw what happened earlier on. It's not very different from, the Muslim India situation earlier on from where it's going.
Yeah, you rightly pointed out that we know that a lot of independence movements are going on in India, in the northeastern states, and then there's a Naxalite movement going on in about 13 or 14 states of India, and then there's a Khalistan movement as well. But one dangerous thing which is happening right now is that when you marginalize a minority, then they start standing up, and this is what is happening in India as far as Muslims are concerned. But the problem with this whole policy of zeroing on against the Muslims and targeting them would be driving them towards extremism as well. When they believe there's no space for them, then they kind of strike back against the Indian state. And then you start talking about across the border terrorism and so on and so forth. But in fact, I think what is happening inside India, the Muslims feel that it is now or never. For the first time, when derogatory remarks were passed against the Holy Prophet, the Muslims of India, they stood up. They demonstrated across India wherever they were able to do that. The houses were razed and they were persecuted and put behind the bars. But we have seen the kind of a resolve never seen in the past, MAHRUKH. I think that is the dangerous area where Modi is entering right now. And something similar is happening in occupied Kashmir as well.
Do you think he's losing, let me come back to you, Radha Sahab, do you think he's losing popularity, or do you think that there's likely to be a third term? Banking on these kind of remarks, banking on this anti-Muslim rhetoric, banking on this this extremist rhetoric that is what the party now stands for. Ji, Radha Sahab, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, please come again. I couldn't follow your question.
I'm saying that, do you think that in terms of popularity, how do you rate Modi's popularity at this time, the party's popularity? Do you think that there's likely to be a third term? Do you think that he's, of course, banking on this rhetoric, he's banking on this extremist ideology that is now, part and parcel of what the party stands for?
Yeah, MAHRUKH, this is something again pretty alarming, that the kind of vehement embrace which Modi is receiving, that makes us believe that this Hindutva is not the artifact of the ancient and archaic reflections, but it is more of a modern social contemporary formation, and it has become a plausible element of Indian society and polity. What we have seen as this Congress, its influence as a formidable political force has largely dwindled, and all the elections they have reflected the very similar undercurrent. So what we are seeing, that even the alternatives of the BJP, they are also from the Hindu nationalist ranks. For instance, this Aam Aadmi Party, which has emerged out to be as an alternative for BJP in New Delhi, has a very similar kind of position when it comes to minorities, Muslims and Kashmir. So this is something which reflects that the future, the forecast of India is not likely to be very different than what it is today. So if, because Indians, their civil society and their right, left and center, they have kind of accepted this retreat, and this BJP's ferocious Hindu nationalism, it has swept across. So that is why the future sounds pretty bleak for India. And as you were earlier pointing out in one of your questions, that this is likely to raise and this is likely to augment fissures within Indian society, and that would eventually lead or might steer India's trajectory towards disintegration, because the kind of authoritarian policies they are inflicting upon their own people, with 23 secessionist movements right now operative across India. So the future for India seems pretty bleak. They will have to reconcile to the existing realities. Unfortunately, right now India is living into an archaic primitive mindset, and they believe that they would be able to reincarnate the Hindu glorious past by creating straw man fallacies. So that is something which is unsurmisable.
What do you think will happen, Javed Sahab? Do you think that, in terms of the safety of the minorities, Muslim minority is a huge minority, and things, like I said, if things continue on the kind of path that we are looking at, do you think there's likely to be again, we're looking at India potentially breaking up again into different parts, like you said?
But before that happens, MAHRUKH, I think we would be seeing more persecution of Muslims, because it is unchallenged. Global community is simply turning away from the Indian Muslims in particular. And ultimately what is going to happen, I agree with you, disintegration is one of the options I think India has right now.
Kashmir is a blatant example of the world ignoring what's happening.
Ignoring, and in particular, I would say the influential world capitals, they're not paying attention to what is happening there. And they can do what they can do, and they can stop at least the persecution of the Muslims. In
and
particular,
we're talking about double standards. I mean,
Mahrukh,
when we talk about Ukraine, Russia, we talk about
exactly that was the point I wanted to raise. That look what happened in Ukraine. The entire Western world rallied behind Ukraine. They provided them billions and billions of dollars of weapon systems and state-of-the-art weapons to the Ukrainians to fight the Russians, because they knew that the body bags would be going back to Moscow, and the body bags would be of the Ukrainians, not of the Western troops. They haven't deployed them. So I think very clearly you see a kind of a double standard as far as India is concerned, Indian Muslims are concerned. And of course it is deplorable what happened with the Ukrainians. They were invaded, a small country, but you really can't have two standards in the world politics. And in the new global order, the new world order, I think we clearly see that the weaker minorities, the weaker nations and the weaker communities are not being paid attention as far as the important influential world capitals are concerned. So I think Muslims would be ignored, Muslims would be left to suffer in India. I don't believe any world power, or even for that matter the Muslim world, is going to support them or help them out by putting pressure on Prime Minister Modi not to do what he is doing over there. But I believe your original question was whether he is going to gain or lose, but I believe that he is going to gain more and more because of his Hindutva policies. India is a young nation.
You think he's likely to get another term?
Exactly. This is what I believe, because that is why he is pursuing the Hindutva policies with so much resilience and without being being challenged by the global communities.
Because that's really all he has to bank on. His performance in other areas, of course, is
I think it's a very deliberate and calibrated policy on part of Narendra Modi, that he knows that the more he talks against the Muslims, the more he takes action against them, the more support he garners from the nationalist Hindu different groups.
Right. Unfortunately, we have to take a break. Thank you so much for being with us, Raja Kesar. We'll come back to talk about the call of nationwide protests by PTI and what it can mean potentially, and what is likely to happen there. We'll be back.
Just like the billboard paintings performed in Pakistan, there is another indigenous form of art performed in Pakistan, and it is the truck art. With its all colorful floral patterns, depiction of human heroes with creative aspects, ratios, calligraphy of poetic verse, and drivers' words of wisdom. This form of art is truly a part of Pakistani transport tradition. Many trucks and buses in Pakistan are highly customized and decorated by their owners. These adjourned vehicles are considered as moving art or jingle art. Because of their unique decor style, these vehicles are quite distinct in layers from other trucks around the world. Each part of the vehicle is decorated differently, with variations depending on the regional style. In Pakistan,
Welcome back. We'll be talking about the call for nationwide protest by Imran Khan, PTI, and let's and what it can mean, whether it's likely to translate into anything tangible for the PTI? Also, the economic side of it, whether they are cognizant of the kind of ramifications overall these kind of protests can have for our economic situation at this time. The call for Charter of Economy, which doesn't seem to have resonated with the PTI at all of those things. Before I go to Rana Ihsan Afzal, Javed Sahab, how do you look at it, the situation? Do you think it's going to be anything, it's going to mean anything for the PTI, what's happening today?
I think PTI, after being ousted from power, they probably thought that it would be easy to launch protest demonstrations across the country, then go for the long march, and they would be putting a lot of pressure on the incumbent government and the establishment as well. Well, the long march, we know what really happened over there. So let us fast forward from that position to the current position. Today they have called for peaceful demonstrations across the country. I think he's trying to test how people are going to respond to his call today. If there's a positive response which is according to his expectations, I think then he will go for some further demonstrations or might even give a call for long march as well.
Do you think that I mean, this seems to suggest that what happened in the long march, the recent long march, they're cognizant of the failure there, and they perhaps overestimated the kind of response that they would have had, they were expecting from this earlier on, the march?
I think he made a strategic mistake by going for the long march without proper preparations and without taking into considerations the kind of impact the long march is going to have. Government made it very clear that they will not allow the marchers into the capital, and I think they went for the overkill in certain conditions as well. So ultimately ended up going back without achieving his objective, and now I think it is going to be extremely difficult to galvanize once again the core support base in Pakistan, which is the young population.
Rana Sahab, do you think that one of the things that is one of the criticisms given to the government, it is said that like Javed Sahab also said that it went for an overkill. Had it not done so, it wouldn't have allowed the PTI to have to save itself by saying that it was the government that had impeded the progress they would have made in this long march. Had they been allowed, it would have led to a lot of numbers. Imran Khan actually coming out and saying that had he remained there, it would have led to a lot of bloodshed. All of those statements, it was a save for them to make those statements. Had the government let them be, it would likely have resulted in more failure.
Well, I think the current situation explains it all. When Imran Khan, there were no restrictions on KPK, there were no restrictions in Gilgit-Baltistan, and he could not gather a large crowd from both those places. The whole province couldn't bring, more than a few thousand people. So he has been exposed. Even the government actions, I think they were mandated because no party could be allowed to stop the circulation of traffic and disturb the lives of the citizens of Islamabad, and we had to take those measures because they had announced that it was going to be a Khuni march, and the agenda was to blackmail and the government and the district government, the city government had allowed them to protest in a specified area, but they were not interested in that. So I think those actions were warranted, and PTI was exposed to a full extent on the fact that they do not have the support of the people to come out the way they thought they were going to come out. And I think this march today...
What do you expect now? What do you expect from this peaceful call for protest at this time? Is it like, Javed Jadoon Sahab is saying, is it a testing ground for them to see what kind of support they have, whether their people will actually come out or not? How does the government see it?
Well, I think the current call for this protest makes no sense. And how am I saying it? Is that the current crisis of the government is the balance of payment crisis, is the fact that we're short of dollars. And those dollars were not arranged in PTI's tenure the whole financial year. Actually, they took a U-turn on the IMF talks, and that is the reason why we have a balance of payment crisis and we've seen the rupee devalue to 210. And the other factor that you have inflation is because there is a super cycle of commodities. The prices of commodities are crazy world over. So what has the government done to exacerbate this situation? They're actually, taking the bold steps required to safeguard the economy and to, make sure that we do not go towards a situation which is Sri Lanka-like. So, these steps that I'm sure the people understand this, and they know that this inflation is not caused by the steps taken by this government. Whatever steps we have taken were necessary for the economy, for the balance of payment crisis, and we're hoping that once the IMF, talks are concluded and we get the release of this tranche, there's going to be balance of payment security for the country. We're going to come out of this crisis, and the rupee is going to start strengthening. So this call, it could be a testing ground, but I feel that our narrative is out there in front of the people, and so is theirs, and people understand.
Rana Sahab, let me come back to you. Please stay with us. Javed Sahab, you heard what Rana Ehsan Sahab is saying. He's saying that, it doesn't matter for them. It's the important financial decisions that have to be taken. And he feels that people understand. Do you think people understand?
I don't think so. They believe that people do understand, but what people understand is that they are being crushed under the pressure of inflation, price hike, and look at the kind of inflation which is wreaking havoc in Pakistan right now. I think Pakistan is among few countries where the inflation right now is the highest. And drum beating on part of coalition government would be very naive, because Imran is still a very formidable political force, has a very formidable following in Punjab, and in fact all the 4 provinces. While on the contrary, Pakistan Muslim League and is only confined to Punjab. They have got their support base in Punjab alone. So Imran, it shouldn't be taken lightly. People, they mustn't sort of misjudge the sentiments of the people as well, because MAHRUKH, what is going to happen after 1st of July? All the budgetary measures they are going to approve in the budget, and when they come into force, I don't believe that people would be happy. They would be extremely angry with the sitting government, because they expected that a person who claimed that he is a good administrator, a good manager, and he delivered in Punjab, and well, when he comes into power, along with the other political parties, he would be able to deliver. He hasn't been able to deliver. I think MAHRUKH, last sentence, I think they have been tried and tested, and they have been found to be wanting, in my opinion.
But have they not? I mean, you're talking about the PTI.
No, I'm talking about the current government.
But have they? I mean, Rana Sahab, has acknowledged he's saying that rupee has gone to 210. He's also saying that they had little choice but to go forward in this direction. I think by and large there's agreement between all political parties that the IMF program has to be followed, and for them to agree these measures had to be taken.
Then MAHRUKH, why announce the hike in petroleum prices in the middle of the night? Why can't they be forthright with the people, honest with them, tell them these are the problems and we are going to go for these decisions?
I think I differ with you on that. Rana Sahab, do you think, are you being forthright with people? Javed Sahab feels you're not. I mean, why do it in the middle of the night? Yes, that's
no,
a fair
you do
question.
it in the middle of the night so that people don't rush up to the petrol stations, and a lot of petrol stations are found to close down their shop and not give service. So it's basically just for that purpose alone that there is no rush or run on the petrol stations. The other thing is, let me put it across straight. Currently, the economic situation demands that these bold steps be taken. The country cannot, afford the relief or the subsidy, in a way where you bring down the petrol prices, you keep the electricity costs down. This just cannot happen. There is no other option. This has to be done. Otherwise,
the PTI, they would have been taking the same decisions. Isn't that true?
No, okay. So I think if this economy was well managed, and if the previous budget, the one for the financial year 21-22, if it was correct, and the government did not dilly-dally on the IMF deal, we would not have been facing a balance of payment crisis today.
But
this is
according to the PTI, let me interject here. We don't have anyone from the PTI, but according I mean, according to the statistics that they have been shared, according to that, there was some 4.9% growth. There's also, you know, overall indicators. Ji.
MAHRUKH, growth is different. The balance of payment crisis is different. And the fact, you know, there was a requirement to raise $30 billion in the last financial year. PTI government did not even manage to arrange for the 50%. And the institutes which were going to lend the hand, they took a U-turn on their commitments. So this crisis is created by PTI, and now the steps which are required to be taken to take Pakistan out of this crisis are being taken by this government. There is no other option. If you bring in Halaku Khan, he won't be able to give relief to the people of Pakistan on petrol or on electricity prices. We have to control our fiscal deficit.
Okay, do you think, I think that you've elucidated this very well, but do you think that that narrative is going forth into, you know, to the people sufficiently? Do you think that people are understanding this? You know, of course, politics is being played on it. Even the protests today is about it, you know, about the price hike and about the fact that these fuel increases. So, you know, all, you know, opposition, which is mainly PTI, is going to reap whatever benefit that they can out of this, unfortunately.
Well, the thing is, I think, you know, the time to play politics on this is not going to work, and we have to educate the people. For example, you know, even after a year, if a government on this political rhetoric comes into power, assuming if it's PTI, they have to take the same steps if they were faced with the similar conditions. So we shouldn't be playing politics, and we should try to educate the people that these decisions are a must. Giving relief today on borrowed money will bring in a bigger disaster a few months ahead. So we, you know, we have to take the corrective measures for this economy, and people of Pakistan need to be educated about it, and they should know that this bad phase is not going to stay forever. Hopefully, when the super commodity cycle breaks, and, you know, the prices start coming down internationally, things will start getting better. Crude is at 120, 124, you know, but it is being predicted to go even higher. So, you know, 2 quarters down the line, when these things calm down, the relief that we get, the space that we get in the economy will definitely be transferred to the people of Pakistan.
Okay, let me come back. Javed Saab, do you think that people have, you know, either that narrative, or you're saying that it's not going it's not translating into the people, into the lower classes, into the grassroots sufficiently? Do you think, I mean, for people to, like you know, Rana Saab is saying nobody can change the reality of having to jack up these prices, because that's where we are. But do you think, you know, the literacy rate, do you think people are going to be able to understand that, or do you think they're going to allow political parties to play politics on this issue?
MAHRUKH, either they didn't have the real understanding of the economy, they had a very poor understanding of the economy, or they were very hypocritical. Because when you talk about the difficulties in the economy, you knew that when you came into power. Even before that, the balance of trade was there, the difference between imports and exports, and you knew the prices of petroleum products were going high in the international market. And the Ukrainian crisis, it wasn't kind of a secret thing happening on the world stage. There was a Ukrainian crisis, there were food shortages were expected, fuel prices expected to go high, and as far as the economy was concerned, they knew what is the economy in Pakistan. So by design, they came into power, they knew it. These are the difficulties. If Halaku Khan cannot do any remedy for Pakistan's economy, even Imran Khan would be advocating the same argument that, well, if in current dispensation you say that even Halaku Khan can come and can't make the difference, then why blame Imran Khan? I think they need to be, what I'm saying, well, there are external factors, MAHRUKH. There is the factor of Ukrainian crisis, there is the factor of, I agree with Rana Saab that the price increase of petroleum products in the international market, and the international factors are definitely playing important role in Pakistan's deteriorating economy. But what I'm saying is people expected that they have the remedy, they have the alternative solutions as far as the resolution of the problems were concerned. When you criticize a particular government and you say that these following points the government is not doing well, not doing good, not doing according to the book, So you come into power and then you go for the remedy. You need to change the system. What we have done, dollar was trading at 180, now it is trading at about 208 right now. So the stock exchange, it kept on losing every day on a regular basis, day in and day out. 700 points, 1000 points, 1200 points. What were the causes? They said that maybe it's because of the uncertainty over the agreement with the IMF. Then they said maybe it's because of the uncertainty over the FATF. FATF issue is resolved, and they believe that Imran Khan had a raw deal as far as IMF was concerned. Now it is their government in power. They can make can make certain changes into the agreement with the IMF and the changes which are in favor of Pakistan. But I don't believe that IMF is going to give them any relief. They have given some kind of a relief to the salaried class in terms of taxes, enhancing the ceiling from 600,000 to 1.2 million, and I think they are having difficulties with the IMF right now. So I think difficulties are not with Imran Khan, not with particularly with the current government. It is the international, basically international factors are playing a very important role in what is happening in Pakistan. And then I think the misgovernance, MAHRUKH. And last
but that
last point,
has to be attributed to the last government. Right?
Yes, the very last point, MAHRUKH. They haven't taxed the well-to-do people in Pakistan. Every kind of a burden is being placed on the middle class, lower middle class, and the lower segments of the society.
Will you answer that?
Well, I'd like to respond that what I'm saying is that we are in a balance of payment crisis because of what Imran Khan government did. That is the biggest challenge being faced by the government currently. And then the second challenge is, inflation because of an increase in the commodity prices. We are taking the remedial steps. We're doing what is right for the economy. These are hard steps. The nation has to go through a hard time. We're going to try to balance it by giving subsidies directed towards the lower income people. We're doing all what we can, but the steps are correct. They're going to bear results. They're going to bear fruit in the coming few weeks. This is what was required to take the hard decisions, and we're doing it on our political cost. And what Imran Khan did was that he did not manage a balance of payment crisis. He dilly-dallied on the IMF deal and then took a U-turn. So we're doing everything possible which is required, and we're taking all our coalition partners along, and we hope that Imran Khan would also come in the National Assembly, sit there and do opposition. And that is what should be done. This government is not a fascist government like Imran Khan government, which will not talk with the opposition. We're willing to do that. But he should let go of his unconstitutional demands.
I'm running out of time, but I need your opinion on this. Don't you think that eventually, I mean, of course, we are the protests or no protests, as far as not coming into the assemblies, wouldn't you agree that it's actually the loss that is going to come? It's going to come to PTI, because they are, of course, you are certainly in a convenient position in terms of passing legislation. With little to no opposition in the assemblies at this time. So, for them to take this decision is really going to reflect on their own political party, whether, they say it has to do with the legitimacy of the government, acceptance of it or not. It's allowing you enough room to do however you want to proceed.
Well, you could say that, and you could also say, I would wish that if they come in the assembly, that would strengthen the system. That would strengthen the system of this parliamentary government form of system, and we wish that they would play their part. Them sitting out, we are going to move forward with whatever is required, but it would be better that they play their role where they should be playing, rather than, relying on fake narratives which are being exposed on a daily basis. So I believe that over a period of time, people will understand that these economic decisions were vital.
Javed Sahab, I just want your quick comment on this. We have seen the President of Pakistan take a stance on the EVM bill, which is was pending for presidential assent. And for him to take that stance, of course, it's unseemly, considering that he's the President of Pakistan. He has to be, completely unbiased and regardless of political affiliation, all of those things. That kind of criticism should have come from the PTI in the assembly, had they been there.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. It was a very bad decision on part of PTI to leave National Assembly of Pakistan, because there would have been a very formidable opposition in the parliament. Leaving the parliament is, I think I once again will agree with you that they left the ground completely open for the current government. Whatever kind of a legislation they want to have, they will have it. And now I believe that many of their parliamentarians, members, National Assembly of PTI, they must be regretting, and they even not coming forward to verify their resignations. And for that very reason, because they feel left out in the decision making process, because National Assembly is the platform where you debate and discuss every important national issue, not outside, not on the streets. So leaving the parliament was a very bad judgment on part of Imran Khan.
Right, unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us, Javed Jadoon Saab. Thank you for joining us, Rana Ehsan Afzal Khan. Of course, we'll know how this protest pans out for the PTI, whether it's a testing ground, how many people turn up. Of course, he's also said, as far as Imran Khan is concerned, he's also said that he might announce another date closer to 10th of July, for another long march. What the plans are at this time seem to be rather up in the air. Let's see what happens as far as this protest is concerned. Let's see what happens in terms of the future of how the PTI wants to proceed with the opposition. Of course, them being in the assemblies, I think there's by and large agreement would perhaps have been a better choice for the party, for the opposition, for democracy and the parliamentary style of politics. Thank you so much for joining us today on this.